John, we're going to open our first show of 2024 with something new, the new Yankee bench coach, Brad Ausmus.
Yes, glad to have him. I'm glad that you were able to get him. And Brad Ausmus, very smart guy, one of the smartest guys in the game. Obviously, he started with the Yankees. They lost him when they made a couple of mistakes at that expansion draft to, I think it was the Rockies. I can't remember at this point. It's been
he went to the
20-something
Rockies.
years ago, so maybe 30 years ago at this point. But
Yeah.
it's great that he's back with the Yankees. I do think it's important. Some people can just kind of slough off bench coach, but you know what? I thought the Yankees underachieved last year for whatever reason, and Brad Ausmus is a guy with experience as a manager in two places, and I always think that's a big plus. I think Don Zimmer was a big plus for the Yankees. He obviously had more experience than anybody, but Brad Ausmus has enough experience, and I think he'll be a big help to Aaron Boone in that dugout, and it's another plus for the Yankees.
Yeah, he replaces Carlos Mendoza, who goes and becomes the manager of the Mets. We'll talk about with Brad Ausmus about becoming the Yankee bench coach, what his responsibilities are, and more. And John and I will try to sum up what's going on in a free agent market that's still hardly moving unless you're a giant superstar. We'll do all that, play hit or error at the end, if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, Happy New Year to you, your family. I want to send it out to all our listeners. Thanks for listening to us. John, New Year, old story. If your name isn't Otani, if your name isn't Yamamoto, a few others, I think we still have a couple of hundred free agents, so it's an old story. What do you think about our current market?
It's amazing. My list is many, many pages long. I mean, the relievers, there don't seem to be a market beyond Ronaldo Lopez with the Braves a while back. I mean, Hader still out there, and many other guys who are pretty darn good. They may not be Hader, but they're really good. The hitting market is going very slowly. Incredible. I mean, we've had Jeimer Candelario and a few other stray guys signed, but basically all the top hitters. I mean, obviously Otani signed. He's both a hitter and a pitcher, but it's incredible how many guys are still out there. And our two local teams, I still feel like they need to do something more. Yankees have improved. Did you see the Yankees are the heavy favorite now to win the AL East? I mean, obviously they got Soto, they got Verdugo. You know, Baltimore hasn't done much, but I mean, didn't the Yankees finish like 20 games behind Baltimore last year? I mean, maybe I'm crazy. I don't get it.
More about betting than me, right? Like that, those are odds based on like what they think the betting will be, right? Like that, the Yankees are kind of a public team, and they got Juan Soto, and people will think that they'll bet on it. I mean, I think if you and I, who know, I think a little about baseball, I don't know that we'd make them the favorites. To your point, it's a hornet's nest. They might be good enough. Now, if they had landed Yamamoto, and you believe in Yamamoto, I think they could catapult to the favorites. But to me, John, it feels a little bit like they got a great big kitchen table in Soto. They have no chairs. Their offseason was to get the table and chairs. They had based a lot on getting Soto, right? Like that was the idea. They were going to get both guys. I think they were stunned in the end that he went to the West Coast. You were probably a little less stunned. Your reporting, which is always excellent. You kept, you had talked about the West Coast perhaps having an advantage there. And I think just at the end, John, there's a lot of things that happened, but the Yankees, I think, wanted to stop at about $275 million. They were willing to go to $300 million. At $300 million, to go further, just to understand, they were told that it would take a $50 million signing bonus. So it's a $50 million signing bonus. It would have been a little over $50 million in posting fees. So it means the Yankees would have had to write a $100 million check on day one if they were going to do this.
Yeah, I'm not blaming them.
All in with the luxury tax implications, it's over $400 million for a pitcher who has yet to throw a pitch in the major leagues.
Yeah.
Having said that, where do they spin now? Because they were so enamored that this guy could pitch at least as a number 3 starter, if not better. So where do they spin here, John?
First, on the betting, I know neither one of us is a bettor, so we're not. Neither is going to be an expert. But I think they do generally reflect reality. If it's that easy and they're that wrong, somebody could pile in there and make a lot of money. I mean, I think generally people think the Yankees are the better team than the Orioles. Which, I mean, what were they? 18 games behind them, something like that. I don't know that they've made up 18 games. Even if you think Soto's a 7 WAR player. That's still not 18 games. I mean, obviously he's not replacing anything great, so let's give him an extra 7 wins. But I'm not seeing it now. As far as where they pivot now, I mean, there are still pitchers out there. They were planning on Yamamoto. I don't know. I mean, I was talking to him throughout this time. They were pretty confident about this, right?
They were Yankee cocky. Like we were talking about
Oh my
Musina,
God.
Sabathia, or Tanaka. They really thought they were getting this guy.
Absolutely.
And I think this is a little bit like Ohtani the first time around. They were very confident they were going to be big players on Ohtani the first time around. They didn't even make the 7 finalists. And they then pivoted and made it a big historic mistake by going to Giancarlo Stanton out of the pivot. Now, they haven't quickly pivoted this time, right? They haven't quickly pivoted,
Yeah.
but they still need, John, I think they need 2 starters. I don't think they need 1. I think their plan was on one end to get Yamamoto and on the other end to do like Frankie Montas and take like a guy who, if everything worked out right, could start a playoff game. And at the worst, maybe get 15, 20 starts, and then you work back in Clark Schmidt and Will Warren and Clayton Beeter, etc. That's what I thought the plan was.
Yeah, I think there's a theme here. I think they were overconfident on Montas too. Montas apparently told the coaches that he really loved it there and he'd love to return. Does that mean he should go back for half as much money as he's going to get somewhere else? I mean, I don't know what they think about that, but they seem like they're kind of annoyed about the whole situation and they thought they were going to get Montas. I mean, my understanding is they offered something around $8 million. I think they were upping it to around $10 million. I don't know, there were incentives too, but I mean, Montas got $16 million in Cincinnati. You can live pretty well in Cincinnati on $16 million.
Yeah.
Probably 10 million or probably even 1.6 million or whatever. But, they were way too confident on Yamamoto. And I don't know why. Yamamoto, obviously, he's not going to give it away during the negotiation, right? Even when he was in New York meeting at Steve Cohen's house, he then requested to go meet with the Yankees. So, I mean, they became even more confident. And I get why they did. But I mean, I don't know, Yamamoto, I think he prepared himself for this. He's a very competitive guy, and he talked it up big. He seemed to know a lot about Yankee history, and they were sold that they were going to get him. Now, he got a better offer in L.A., but I mean, I think nothing that was said at the press conference makes you think that he was really going to go to the Yankees or the Mets anyway. I think he wanted to go to the Dodgers, and it worked out great for him. He did a great job. His agent did a great job. But now I think the Yankees need to pivot. I know you mentioned Stanton a lot. Obviously, that on the whole has not worked. It looks very bad at the moment, particularly. I mean, let's not forget he was good the first year. He's been very good in the postseason. But right now, it obviously looks bad. I'm not opposed to pivoting. They are the New York Yankees. I understand they're the favorites for some reason that I can't explain. I still don't think they're the best team, and I certainly don't think they're better than the Dodgers. And I think baseball is great when the Dodgers are great, and the Yankees are great. And look, their pitching isn't as good, right? They traded a bunch of guys to get Soto. I mean, I'm not denigrating that trade. I would have done it too, but right now it's not a deep staff. I'm with you. They need 2 guys probably, and there are a lot of guys available. I'm not saying you have to get Snell or you have to get Montgomery, which we'll see. I mean, maybe they have preferences elsewhere too, right? Montgomery maybe prefers to go to Texas. That's kind of the guess there, but there are other pitchers out there that could fill what King was going to do and other guys were going to do, whether it be Manaea, Lorenzen. There, it's a long list of guys. I got my list right here.
Yes.
It's over 200 guys
as you mentioned,
left.
It's multiple pages.
I got many pages. Here we go.
You know what surprises me a little, John, and maybe this speaks to how my brain works, is like, they clearly, the Yankees, and by the way, the Mets wanted him also, were in on Yamamoto. That's the guy they wanted. And he felt more certain to them, having never pitched in the major leagues, than other guys. Like Blake Snell has won 2 Cy Young awards in the major leagues. Now, I feel like there's a whiff of Carlos Rodon about Blake Snell. I'm not sure that this is the locale he should play in New York. Jordan Montgomery is a guy they had. Is the group that traded him believing he was one thing, about to pay him as a completely other thing? Shane Bieber is probably gettable from Cleveland. He missed 2 months last year with an elbow injury. His stuff was down before then. He's a free agent in a year. We saw the Atlanta Braves pivot hard away from Dylan Cease because the ask was so much, and take a big gamble on Chris Sale. Like, those are the available guys. Is Corbin Burns going to get traded? I think only if they got a hostage level return, or they're going to play it to July and see where they are. Will Miami trade one of their starters? Does Seattle have to cut more money and willing to trade Luis Castillo? All that stuff is going to cost such an abundance of prospects. You got to think about like a Jason Dominguez type of guy. I
Right.
do think by swinging and missing on Yamamoto, the Yankees are in a situation now where they badly need something, and it's more of a mystery and uncertainty than a guy who never threw a pitch in the major leagues.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loved Yamamoto. Everybody's convinced. I mean, when Cashman went out there, he threw a no-hitter, but even beyond that, his ERA lifetime is 1.8. So, I mean, obviously he's an outstanding pitcher, throws 96, 97, poise, all that. I do think that he's going to be really good, but at this point we gotta get beyond that. They didn't get him. He's with the Dodgers. The Dodgers are fantastic. It is the New York Yankees. I'm not opposed to doing it via free agency. I don't think they want to trade Dominguez anyway. Certainly not going to trade Volpe. I don't see how Luis Castillo is traded, or probably anybody from Seattle. I don't think Burns is getting traded. Cease, the price is huge, as it should be. Bieber, I think, is good, but has questions, as you said. I mean, I think they really have to investigate this free agent route first. And I'm not saying you have to go out and get Snell and you have to pay him everything, whatever. I mean, to me, Montgomery, I think while they like Montgomery and certainly like him more than they did when he left, and he pitched great and he beat. The irony is he's the guy who could beat the Astros in the playoffs, right? The Yankees didn't want to use him in the playoffs, and then
That's what they thought Rodon was going to be, the guy who could beat the Astros in the playoffs. I think they should stop worrying about the Astros and just improve their team. John, to your point, I think we've mentioned this previously in I think columns, but it's a big point. You hinted at it. The expectation is that the regional sport network issue is going to get resolved this month. And the Rangers, who I think make over $100 million a year through, Diamond Sports Group,
right.
The Bally's Group that went bankrupt, they're going to have it clarified. And there is this suspicion within the game that once they get that clarified, that their number one guy might be Montgomery. Once they know how much money they have, they got to get through a first half of the season, likely without Scherzer and DeGrom, and like bringing back Montgomery, who they know works for them. Might be the way they go there. And John, I just want to throw in one other thing because I think it's interesting. The Yankees, if they get the 2022 version of Nestor Cortez and Carlos Rodon, who were both All-Stars, by the way, that was a 2.68 ERA combined in over 50 starts. Last year, it was a 6 ERA in 20-something starts combined for two injury-plagued guys last year. If those guys pitch like number 2 and 3 starters, which they did as recently as 2022, the Yankee need decreases. But how much of a risk can they take that those guys are going to pitch like that and Garrett Cole is going to remain unbreakable as they move forward?
Well, I trust Garrett Cole. I mean, the other two guys have been, obviously they were hit and miss. They were hit the year before or missed last year. So they clearly want to agree with us and are trying to go get somebody and are thinking about Montgomery and are thinking about Snell and all the other guys that are out there, I'm sure. Montgomery, I don't want to say long shot, but I'm with you. I think Texas is the team. I thought so from the beginning. I think they're going to resolve this issue. They're going to get a one-time payment. Rumor is it's going to be $90 million. Maybe that won't cover the whole bill for Montgomery, but you would think he'd want to go back, right? He was a World Series champion for them. Why wouldn't he want to go back? So I can't think the Yankees are a favorite there. I mean, even that, certainly maybe they'd be gun shy now because they were so confident on Yamamoto. Maybe they don't feel too confident about the other ones, but I think that he'd want to go to Texas. Now, Texas probably could use Hader as well, so maybe they would go in that direction. I don't know, but there are a lot of teams that could use Montgomery, and he's been linked to just about everybody, including the Mets. Boston, his wife is a medical student in Boston, so maybe he prefers that even over the Yankees. So I don't think their chances are that great on Montgomery. I think it's either Snell or probably a multitude of these other guys that have been good in the past and have potential, like Ryu, Manaya, somebody like that, Bieber as a trade. They do need to do something, though. I'm not saying it has to be Snell, but to me, that's where the focus needs to be at the moment.
John, why don't we wrap up this segment by talking a little about what the Mets do pivot-wise here. They also didn't get Yamamoto. Steve Cohen went to an awful lot of trouble. He flew to Japan. That didn't work. He had him for dinner at his house. That didn't work. The suspicion is now they would want to add at least one, maybe two guys, not big money, the Ryu, Manaya, level of guy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, they said they were going to be competitive, and if they add a couple of those guys, I think their rotation will be okay. And I mean, you never know. I mean, I know I still can't figure out the odds board exactly. They were only plus 700. Philly was plus 350. So I mean, is Philly only a little better than the Mets? And are the Mets so much better than Miami? I mean, they finished way behind Miami. They weren't even close to Miami last year. Now Miami was a little bit fortunate in terms of they won a lot of close games. Maybe they're not as good as their record, whatever. But I mean, I think the Mets can be competitive if they get a couple of those guys. I mean, Paxton, I would kind of lean away from because he's had some injury questions. Ryu seemed to be coming on at the end of the year. Minaya was pitching very well at the end of the year. I would kind of maybe look at those two guys. If you get both of them, you have Severino, you have Quintana. Obviously, Senga was a fantastic signing a year ago. Their rotation is decent at that point, and they can be competitive. So
Yeah,
I just don't want them to be liars. I think they need to be competitive, and right now they're not necessarily competitive, despite the odds. I'm not plus 700. I'm not putting any money. I'm not betting anyway, but I'm not betting on the Mets at plus 700.
Yeah, look, John, I think one of the ways they make everything better is they should try to win on good relief pitchers. I know you've mentioned maybe Hader as a guy that obviously is
Yeah,
going to the very top, but I think if they did, say, a combination of like Jordan Hicks and Hector Neris, like suddenly two guys who you could imagine with Diaz really locking down the last 9 outs of the game. Suddenly it's easier to
yeah.
have Ryu, who's probably a 5, 6 inning pitcher at this point, or Minaya, the same thing, or bring some of the young guys along. I think it's one of the ways they get to contention is having a much better bullpen. And the bullpen market has hardly been touched to this point. Look,
Right.
he didn't have a good year last year, but I'm a big Wandy Rodriguez guy, Wandy Peralta
Peralta,
guy.
yeah, yeah,
I went back to the Astros 20 years ago on
yeah,
Wandy Peralta
yeah.
guy.
Even
Uh,
Robertson, I don't,
yeah,
he was pretty good for the Mets
like
last
guys who
year.
who can play here, who have, real fortitude, are not afraid of the moment. Anyway, yeah, look, John, I suspect by the time we're back doing this again next week, we'll have about a couple of hundred free agents still. It doesn't feel like things are moving quick.
No, they're
But if
not
you
moving
stick
quick.
with yeah,
Yeah, let me
but
just finish on
yeah,
the bullpen. I was playing fantasy baseball a little bit there with my column to suggest Hader. I'd love to see Hader and Diaz combined, lefty righty, the two best closers in the game right now who are healthy. I'd love that, but I think you're being more realistic to say Neris and say Matt Moore and Robertson and I
Jordan
mean
Hicks, who has big
Hicks.
stuff,
Right, right. I mean, I don't know if I'd recommend Chapman, but there's a
Yeah.
long list of guys with talent who could fill out that bullpen, and they need a lot of help in that bullpen. That's probably more realistic. Your solution is probably uh, closer to the mark than mine, but it's not my money, so it's easy for me to spend it.
It's Steve Cohn's money, and I feel like these are markets because of his money. He could really separate himself, and we're not talking about Yamamoto or Tani type money, where I think he could separate himself. Uh, John, as I mentioned, I think we'll be talking about this for quite a while, right up to spring training and maybe even into spring training. But if you stick with us on the show, coming up next is the new Yankee bench coach, Brad Ausmus. John and I are so pleased to be joined by the new Yankee bench coach, Brad Ausmus, 18-year major leaguer. Interestingly, 4 teams, but not the team that drafted him, the New York Yankees, who took him in the 48th round in 1987. But he's a Yankee now, hired to be the bench coach for Aaron Boone. And Brad, you're replacing Carlos Mendoza. And I wondered about this, is Mendoza is now going to manage the Mets. He's going to be a manager for the first time. You managed in 2 different locales in Detroit and with the Angels. What does Carlos Mendoza not know? Can you not know until you actually become the manager and you're sitting in that chair and not just an observer?
Oh yeah, it's funny for me because I did the opposite route that he did. I started out as a manager for those 2 teams, like you mentioned, and then I went to being a bench coach. Um, and you discover that sometimes the manager is just the position of authority, and there's gonna sometimes be headbutting that goes on with the authority. As a bench coach, it's actually much easier to kind of relate on a personal level with the players because I am not the position of authority.
Let me ask you this, Brad. Why did you decide to take this job? You have been a manager in two places. I think you were a candidate in Houston, probably several other places as well. Didn't feel like you got a fair shake with the Angels. You don't have to say it, I did. Why did you take a job as bench coach?
Well, I was Mark Kotze's bench coach a couple of years ago in Oakland, and Kotze's a good friend of mine. It was a hard decision because he wanted me to come back, and I just said, you know what, Kotze, I think I want to try and do something else. And I kind of took a tack to get into the baseball operations side, more front office type stuff. I didn't know if I'd get another opportunity to manage, and I thought that was going to be my best opportunity to really be involved in putting a team together, roster management, personnel moves. And I did get the GM interview in Houston, and that went really well. But really, other than that, I didn't get a lot. There wasn't a lot of interest. So fast forward to this offseason, and Cash and Booney called me and asked if I wanted to be the bench coach after Carlos was named as the Mets manager. And I was like, well, if I want to get in the game, I got to do something. And it's New York. It's the Yankees. So that was kind of the decision-making process.
I wonder what the year away was like. You obviously had been involved in this. I think you were drafted as a high school player and you went through the minor leagues, right? As a minor, like you didn't play at Dartmouth, but you played in the minor leagues for the Yankees. So you've been doing this probably since your late teens every year. What was a year away like?
Okay, so it actually wasn't my first year away. The year I got let go by the Angels,
Oh, okay.
that was after 19. I had 20 and 21 where I was not in baseball. I was, fortunately for me, I still had a contract and I decided to enjoy some time. Last year wasn't me enjoying time as much as I was forced to enjoy time.
And what did you do? Did you stay on top? Are you watching games? Are you making a lot of calls to people to try to stay current? What do you do in the year away?
Well, I definitely every single morning got up and looked at each box score, went through every single box score every single day, all season long. Watch games here and there, but truthfully, because Mark Kotze would call me from time to time, I spent a lot of time focusing on the A's. I was with him the year before, and I still tried to be a sounding board for him. So I tried to stay current when I could with the A's.
Joel and I were there. I think it was probably late '92 when the Yankees made that mistake and lost you, Charlie Hayes, and Carl Everett, three outstanding players who were going to all be. Charlie was already an excellent third baseman, and you two had fantastic careers in the big leagues. You for 18 years. What does it mean to come back to the Yankees? What exactly do the Yankees mean to you? I know you grew up in Connecticut.
I did. I grew up right on kind of the DMZ of Yankee Red Sox fandom, and I was very excited when Cash first texted me. Even though I had really kind of set sights a little higher, I went, God, the Yankees are tough to turn down, man. This is the most storied organization, in sports. Never mind baseball. So I was excited. I was trying to tone it down for Cash a little bit because I knew there was an interview process, but I was very excited.
Yeah, just this little side note. The most amazing thing about that expansion draft in 1992, where Carl Everett, yourself, and Charlie Hayes were taken, the Yankees were hurt more than anyone, but they really could have been hurt. The Yankees never protected Mariano Rivera in any round of that expansion draft. So the dynasty could have died that November in 1992 before it even began. Brad, what do you think you bring as a former major league manager? You know the area, obviously you grew up in this area. You played in the minor leagues with this team. What do you bring to Aaron Boone in this job?
Well, I think primarily I bring a voice that has sat in the exact same seat that he sits in. The newly minted Hall of Famer, and it hasn't been inducted, obviously, Jim Whalen told me when I got the job in Detroit, he said, hey, this is going to be a lonely seat sometime. So I learned that it can be, and it's nice to have someone beside you who you can talk to about whether it's tough decisions, tough situations, dealing with players, tactics, whatever it may be. It's just different if you're in that seat. So I think in addition to that, I have the in-game experience. So he's going to get another opinion, and he's going to get what I feel is an honest opinion. It's going to be the truth, whether he wants to hear it or not. And hopefully that's how the respect gets built between Booney and I.
I know you follow the game very closely. Yankees won 82-80 last year, and Brian Cashman declared it a disaster. Now, there aren't too many teams, maybe the Dodgers, maybe a couple others, who would call 82-80 a disaster. But why do you think the Yankees are going to be better than that this year? I mean, obviously they've made a couple of moves, but they probably still need pitching. What do you think about the team that you're joining?
Well, I think you're certainly a better offensive club immediately. As you know, with Soto added, you got Verdugo as well. It's certainly a better offensive club, but I don't disagree with everything you say. Now, I'm a bench coach, so Cash isn't calling me asking me about player moves or roster acquisitions. But yeah, I don't disagree. It'd be nice. It would have been nice, if you got a guy like Yamamoto or a top of the rotation to the middle of the rotation guy. But it's tough out there. It's not easy. There's 30 teams, and even if you offer more money, there's no guarantee they're going to go with you. But I don't disagree with you.
So you live in the San Diego area. The Soto has been there was there for a year and a half. I'm assuming you saw some of him. The world knows of course, who he is, but what is the impact when you take as good an offensive player as him and put him into a line? The Yankees were not a good offensive team last year. They were in, I think, the bottom 6 or 7 in runs per game. They were tied for the worst with the A's in batting average. What does a singular great offensive player bring to a lineup?
Well, there's different types of great offensive players. The one thing this guy really does well is get on base. And, I don't know how Booney's going to have the lineup shake out, but there's another guy that's pretty good at driving people in. So he immediately gives more opportunities to Aaron Judge. Now, the key to all this is they both have to stay healthy. We need them healthy because they're phenomenal offensive players. And I said this not too long ago to somebody else. As good as they are, we need other people up and down the lineup to contribute, because Juan Soto and Aaron Judge are not going to get hits every single day. They're not going to drive in runs or get on base every single day. You need contributions up and down the lineup, even trickling onto the bench.
Being in San Diego, you obviously saw Soto, but you saw Blake Snell as well. And obviously, free agency can be a funny thing. Every team wanted Yamamoto. Here we are in January, and about half or more of the free agents are still out there, including the NL Cy Young winner. And by the way, trivia, if the Yankees do get Snell, and who knows what happens here, they have the 2 defending Cy Young winners. I think that's the first time since 1990 when the Royals had Brett Saberhagen and Mark Davis. I don't think anybody else knows that, but somebody looked that up for me today. Having seen Snell pitch over there for a couple of years, what were your observations? And do you have any theory as to why this is taking so long for a guy who won the Cy Young?
Snell was a little bit of a tale of 2 pitchers. He was outstanding this year, obviously. Struggled a little bit last year, but seemed like he returned to form. So he is an interesting potential starting pitcher. I don't know. I'm not sure who his agent is, quite frankly. So that could always play into why he hasn't signed. But he's good. He's a top of the rotation guy for sure. I'll gladly take 2 Cy Young Award winners in the rotation.
His agent, you might have heard of him, is Scott Boras, which maybe explains.
Oh, hey, don't tell Scott I didn't know
that. No. You mentioned the rest of the lineup having to produce also in conjunction with the 2 great stars in their prime, Soto and Judge. I wonder, how much homework are you doing to this point? I wonder if you could pick out a guy or 2, a healthy Rizzo, Volpe in year 2. Where do you think this needs to come from, and why?
I don't know that, truthfully, if I'm qualified to tell you, because I wasn't around the club last year, and really all my information I've gotten since I was hired is discussions with Aaron Boone about the players, their abilities, their makeup. I can tell you this, Booney loves these guys. He thinks it's a great group of guys that they really mesh well together. He's a big fan of Volpe. I know he won the Gold Glove and hit some homers, but he was also a first-year player, and he made some first-year player mistakes. But it's not just him. It's Verdugo. It's Grisham. It's up and down the lineup. It's Trevino.
I want to ask you about your career a little bit, because it's kind of an amazing career. 48th round draft choice, as Joel mentioned. And by the way, 1,971 games is the most by a Jewish player. I saw this on Wikipedia, so I believe everything I see on Wikipedia. But Joel and I appreciate that it's the most by a Jewish player. So mazel tov for that. 48th round, though. You ended up playing more games than the 1,150 players who were picked behind you. How did you do it? Squatting back there? I mean, it looks dangerous to me. I wouldn't go back there for 5 pitches.
Well, fortunately for me, there was a few general managers that really enjoyed the pitch selection, pitch framing aspects of being a catcher, working with a pitching staff, because my bat was light. And I don't know which way I would have gone if I played nowadays. Maybe I would have been valuable because of pitch framing, or maybe I wouldn't have been valuable because I didn't hit for power. So, 48th round picks, they don't even have 48 rounds anymore. So I would have been a free agent signing, if anything. Probably would have ended up going to college if they didn't have all those rounds. I think they might have had 70 rounds at that point when I was drafted.
Yeah, I'm also wondering. John mentioned your catching career. You were known. You won 3 Gold Gloves as a top flight defensive catcher, as a cerebral guy. I wonder if you could discuss the balance between, you probably have great instinct, internal knowledge of the game, and we're always having this discussion, against whatever the data that is provided to a team. Where do you fall in this as trying to decide how to, as you're the bench coach, is your job to be instinctual, to turn to Booney and go, I know you got all the numbers, but my instinct, my history says we got to be thinking about X here.
So let me give you a little background. When I was with Houston, I created the opponent lineup scouting reports every single series for 8 years. And I ran the meetings with the pitchers, right-handed pitchers, left-handed pitchers. And I actually did this with data. I did this with, back then, it's still around, but it was, I think it was college kids sitting in a chair marking pitches, but it was called Inside Edge, and it wasn't perfect, not nearly as accurate as today's, not nearly as much information as today, but it was something. And I found, after doing this for 8 years, that data, for the most part, was right. It's going to get you to the right spot when you're calling pitches. Now, that being said, there were many times where I had to go against the data because I thought the data was leading me in the wrong direction, or it had already led me in the wrong direction. So I do firmly believe that data helps. It helps you, especially putting a roster together. But you can't be afraid to make a decision with your eyes at times. It's not going to be a ton of times. There's going to be extenuating circumstances often when you do that. But experience does have value. And I'm not going to put it on par with data, because I think data is going to get you most of the way there. But you have to have some feel for what's happening on the dirt in front of you.
You're obviously a very smart guy with terrific experience, not only as a player, but a major league manager, front office. You bring a lot to the party. You are well acquainted with the Astros. I mean, I'm sure you're aware that the Yankees' bugaboo has been the Astros. Could you sense that this was part of the reason that they wanted you so much? Or, I mean, obviously you have other qualifications, but you're very close with Bagwell and many of the other Astros, and they've done very, very well, as we know, in New York.
Yeah, I am close with Bagwell, although I haven't talked to him much since I signed with the Yankees. The Astros that were never mentioned during the course of the interview process. The Astros never came up.
Okay.
But I will say this though. I've known Booney for years from playing against him, and I've mentioned before, he was at a Christmas party here at my house, him and his wife. So I do know Booney, and I've known Cash really since I was in big league camp with the Yankees as a minor league player. I'm going to say it was probably 91, 92. And I believe it was Cash's first full season as an employee of the Yankees, obviously not the general manager or president. So I have, although it's not like we've stayed in touch on a weekly basis or anything, I have known Cash for decades.
Since you mentioned that again, how you knew Cash from the early 90s, and we all remember the day that you were drafted. I mean, Joel and I were chasing Tim McCleary and it's Gene Michael and trying to get answers as to what exactly went wrong. Although, as Joel pointed out, it's probably lucky someone drafted you, or the Rockies drafted you instead of Mariano Rivera. What was that day like for you? Were you stunned? I mean, I mean, there are a lot of positives to being a ball player, but that's kind of a negative that you could be a Yankee one day and now on an expansion team.
Yeah, so that was in I believe November. I can't remember what month it was in. It was in the
Yeah.
offseason. I'm guessing November. And when I was in the minor leagues, I was bouncing back and forth. I was playing in the minor leagues during the spring and summer, and then I was going to Dartmouth College to get my degree during the winter. So when this happened, I was actually at Dartmouth sitting in front of a TV in a fraternity. And you know, the announcers on the program had said, all right, because after each round, the Yankees or each team could protect another 3 or 4 players. So after the first round, they kind of predicted I was protected. And then 2 rounds later, my name is called and I was flabbergasted. I was stunned. I thought I was going to be a Yankee for life. You know, when you're in the minor leagues, I drafted by him. I played with him for 5.5 years. I thought I was going to be a Yankee for life. And instantly, I'm a Colorado Rocky. And this is pre-cell phone. The Rockies call my parents in Connecticut. And my parents have to call me and give me, I think, Dick Balderson's number to call the Rockies and have them welcome me.
Was a more innocent time. It definitely was November of 1992. One of the two hosts of this show got married the same weekend of that expansion draft. So I know it was November of 1992. You mentioned, Brad, that just as a way maybe to wrap this up, that you would thought at one point you'd be a Yankee for life. It went on delay for several decades, but you are a Yankee now. I wonder, what do you look most forward to in being in that uniform with this organization now?
I mean, truthfully, I want to win the World Series. I'm not making any predictions because I don't like to jinx things. I'd love to see a parade in New York City. That's really what I'd love to see.
Yeah, well, that's good for me also. It's about 2 blocks that way. If it starts in the Canyon of Heroes, which it usually does. Brad, we do appreciate it. We could let our listeners, our viewers on YouTube know you really helped us here. Our initial guest had a bag out at the last second, and Brad, you might not have done it in your career a lot, but you were a great pinch hitter for us here. And we truly appreciate you joining us on the show, and best of luck in the job. And I'm sure we'll both see you in Tampa in several weeks.
And you weren't as bad a hitter as you're making out to be. I think you're modest. I know your defense was your calling card, but
it was. I got pinch hit for a lot more than I pinch hit for.
I get it. I understand.
Thanks for joining us on the show, Brad.
All right, guys. Good talking to you.
We, of course, thank Brad Ausmus for joining us on the show. John, is for the first time in 2024, let's play hit and error or error.
I'm going to start off negatively with an error. I'm going to give my error to the Cubs. I loved what they did last year. Dansby Swanson is an absolute winner. They certainly improved, came within 1 game of the Arizona Diamondbacks and making the playoffs. Maybe they would have made that run. I thought they were going to do something big this year. Certainly when they signed Craig Counsell to manage, who is one of the best managers in the game, and paid him an unprecedented $40 million to manage. And I still think they need to do something in terms of offense. And, I mean, their revenues are huge. I was just in Chicago. I dropped my daughter and her cousin off. They went ice skating at Wrigley Field. I didn't even ask what it cost, but I'm sure it cost something. And, they're making money like crazy. Time for the Cubs to start spending.
Yeah, no doubt, Cody Bellinger, who was arguably their best player last year, still a free agent. So, maybe we'll see something along those lines, before it's all said and done. John, I'm going to give a hit to a team that's maybe been the most active team this offseason. I think they've made 9 or 10 trades. They've moved money around on the chessboard like crazy, and they've addressed some issues, all with a level of risk. And that's the Atlanta Braves, as they try to, stay better than the Phillies, Mets, Marlins, and keep pace with the Dodgers. And I do wonder, when all the over-under stuff come out from the handicappers, if they're still going to be over the Dodgers. They brought in Jared Kelenic, not my idea of a guy. I always worry about immature guys. I think he showed his immaturity. I think the fact that the Mariners essentially just gave him away to get rid of money suggested they were tired of it, but he's clearly a talented guy. I think he was the 6th pick in the draft by the Mets. He clearly has talent. Does he solve left field for them? The other, positions, the other 8 positions are solid for them. So that's the position they're trying to solve. They're gambling on Chris Sale. Can he make 20 starts and be upright to make a couple of postseason starts? In October, Ray Kerr, a heavy, great curveball, high octane fastball lefty guy. And also Aaron Bummer, another lefty. They went very lefty heavy. They know that ultimately to get back to the World Series through the NL, it's Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber on the Phillies. It's Freeman and Ohtani on the Dodgers. They want to have plenty of left-handed arms for it. And I just like at a time, John, we spent a lot of time in the previous segment talking about gridlock, nothing going on. Alex Anthopoulos is a very aggressive baseball executive. He goes and tries to solve his problems.
Yeah, I think you said it right. It's a gamble. It's a risk with Sale, but I'm not going to bet against. We talk about betting a lot on the show, and we never talk betting. But I would never bet against Alex Anthopoulos or the Braves. I think look at Sale as a gamble. He's been injured the last couple of years. I mean, certainly, he did win a championship, so you can't say that was a bad signing with Boston. But it's a lot of money for a guy who's been injured. I think the Phillies are really good. Like last year, I picked the Phillies to beat the Braves. I was wrong again. The Braves always come through. And probably should be tired of picking against the Braves and being wrong every single time. So I'm going to agree with you here that they're a hit. They're a thumbs up, and they've certainly done a lot. And they do things differently than everybody else, and it usually turns out right.
Yeah, John, hopefully we could say something positive about our podcast doing something right, because it's exciting news. The show's a finalist for the 2024 Sports Podcast Awards for Best Baseball Podcast. We need your votes. Fans out there, please go to sportspodcastgroup.com, click vote now, and vote for the show under Best Baseball Podcast. The voting ends January 28th. It does help. If you like this show, give us a vote. All this kind of stuff helps. Like if you go to Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to our podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. That helps. What helps the show every week, Andrew Hartz, Jake Brown, our terrific producers who help us week to week. Something else new I just want to mention, watch us now, the New York Post Sports YouTube page. You can find the show. We're on that now. And John, it's 2024. We got a lot of free agents. We have arbitration numbers being exchanged in 2 weeks, spring training in about 5 or 6. We've got a lot to do, so we hope you stick with us. The show, a podcast from the New York Post.